What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Who Wants to Brawl YouTube channel. That is not a question, that is a statement. My name is Who, and I'm letting you know I want to brawl. Here, we're all about the Magic format Brawl, specifically in regards to Magic Arena, so we don't have to worry about budget, we only have to worry about wildcards.
This episode is a new deck tech. On these episodes, I go over a new Brawl commander and walk you through my ideas and strategies of how best to build this commander. Today we're going to be talking about Aegar, Freezing Flame, which is 1 blue and a red for a 3/3 giant wizard that says whenever a creature an opponent controls takes excess damage, if a giant wizard or spell we control dealt damage to it, draw a card this turn. So with this deck, we're going to want large giants, we're going to want spells that deal a lot of damage, and hopefully with every time we destroy a creature, we draw a card and completely overwhelm our opponents with card advantage. So the first strategy today is going to be the wizards. Aegar allows us to draw cards not only with giants or spells, which is probably the main focus, but the wizards as well. And this allows us to fill out the early game with some creatures that will be beneficial to our advantage. Magmatic Channeler can tap to discard a card and exile the top 2 cards of our library, and then we can play one of them until end of turn. This gives us a little bit of card advantage and a little bit of card selection. Umara Mystic is a 3-mana 1/3 flyer that whenever we cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So basically, whenever we go to destroy a creature, this gets a little bit bigger and swings in the air. Getting bigger is actually very important for this deck, because if it gets chump blocked, we'll probably end up drawing a card. Ironcrag Pyromancer is perfect in this deck, because whenever we deal excess damage with Aegar on the battlefield, we draw a card triggering the Pyromancer's ability, possibly drawing another card, or at least killing another creature. And then Heartfire Immolator is a 2-mana 2/2 with prowess, so whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, or technically enchantment or artifact, it gets +1/+1, gets a little bigger, and then it can sacrifice itself to deal damage equal to its power to a creature, allowing us to draw an additional card, so long as Aegar is on the battlefield. Our next strategy is going to be damage-based removal. Aegar's ability doesn't trigger when a creature is destroyed, but rather than when a creature is dealt excess damage, so we're going to want to deal as much damage as we can, as efficiently as we can, to hopefully trigger Aegar's ability enough times to overwhelm our opponents with that card advantage. So Shock and Frostbite are each 1-mana instants that deal 2 damage to any target, and Frostbite comes with the advantage of dealing 3 damage if we control 3 or more snow permanents, which we have no reason not to be running all snow lands. Redcap Melee might seem risky, being a 1-mana instant that deals 4 damage to a creature, but if that creature isn't red, we sack a land. But if it's red, this has virtually no downside, and with Aegar on the battlefield, it's basically turning that land into a card, and that can be worth it. And Demon Bolt is a 3-mana instant that deals 4 damage, but we can foretell it and then cast it for 1 later. Casting it for 1 later makes this card a prime card in this deck. So we can foretell this on turn 2, play Aegar on turn 3, and then cast this for 1 mana on turn 4 and still have enough mana to destroy something else, hopefully, making this card a borderline MVP in the deck. Scorching Dragonfire is a 2-mana instant that deals 3 damage and comes with the upside of exiling a creature if it dies this turn. Perforos's Intervention deals twice X damage to target creature or planeswalker most of the time in this deck, and comes with the upside of being able to make a large creature that can swing in for the kill in the right situation. Storm's Wrath simply is a 4-mana, deal 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker card. It does kill Aegar, but we draw a card off of everything else it kills on Aegar's way out the door. And for anyone that played Limited in Kaldheim, they'll know that Squash is an absolute devastating removal spell when you have a giant on the battlefield. 2 mana to deal 6 damage, kills just about everything, and on top of that, synergizes extremely well with Aegar. Tundra Fumarole deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and then gives us back an amount of colorless mana equal to the amount of snow mana we spent to cast this. For those that have previously watched my channel, you know that I hype up cards like Shredded Sails a lot, and we're running red, so therefore we're running Shredded Sails. The flexibility of destroying an artifact dealing 4 damage to a creature with flying or being able to cycle it is worth the inefficiency of the card. And Thundering Rebuke is a simple 2 mana, deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker, while Soulseer deals 5 damage to target creature or player, but that permanent also loses Indestructible, killing some of those pesky gods. And we're not quite done with removal yet. We still have to deal with instants and sorceries, on top of dealing with Aegar, which is currently the most played commander in Brawl, and it's an enchantment, which in blue and red, is difficult to deal with, so we gotta put in some special cards to get rid of it. Mystical Dispute is the perfect way to counter our opponent's counter spells to make sure our spells go through, and then Negate is just an efficient spell that has become a staple in just about every format it's in at the current moment, maybe outside of Legacy or Vintage, but we don't talk about those ones. And while Raven Form leaves behind a body, making it not the best removal spell, the fact that that body is so easily taken out actually plays well into our deck. Exiling a creature and giving them a chump blocker draws us a card if they block with it, so we're perfectly fine making this deal. And then Bone Crusher Giant is just a great card to have in just about any deck. You can cast it as an adventure, deal 2 damage to something, and then cast it as a giant, synergizing great with our deck, especially if we're able to take out an X1 with it. And then Flame Spill is a 3 mana instant that deals 4 damage, and excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. Doesn't synergize very well with Aegar, but is nonetheless an efficient removal spell that also damages our opponent, and I love dealing a lot of damage, so we're going to rock with it. Our next strategy is utility pieces to help the deck run a little bit more smoothly. These are not cards that synergize perfectly with our commander, but nonetheless help the deck run efficiently. First up, we have Invasion of the Giants, which is a 2 mana enchantment saga that we can scry 2 on chapter 1. Then we draw a card, and we may reveal a giant to deal 2 damage to our opponent. It's important that this does not take out a creature, just deals damage to our opponent. And then chapter 3 says the next giant spell we cast costs 2 colorless less to cast. And then Battle of Frost and Fire is a good way to take out all the small creatures getting in the way of our giants when we're ready to go in for the kill. Chapter 1 deals 4 damage to each non-giant creature in each planeswalker. The other abilities are nice ways of, if the game still continues to stall out, to make sure we get pushed a little bit ahead, with chapter 2 scrying 3. And chapter 3 saying that until end of turn, whenever we cast a spell with CMC 5 or greater, we draw 2 cards and then discard a card. And Glimpse the Cosmos is a must in any blue deck that involves giants. For 2 mana, we can look at the top 3 cards of our library and put 1 into our hand, but we can cast it from a graveyard as long as we control a giant for 1 blue mana. And then Arcane Signet is just a Brawl staple, 2 mana artifact, taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Kind of speaks for itself. Giant's Grasp is wonderful in this deck. It's a 4 mana enchantment aura that we have to enchant a giant we control, but when it enters the battlefield, we gain control of target permanent until it leaves the battlefield. It is really funny watching an opponent ramp into 1 card like a Sika or a Koma or Ugin or whatnot, and then just casting this, taking it. Most of the time they instantly concede, and it's pretty hilarious when they do. And then Fiery Emancipation just throws damage all over the place, tripling any damage that we do. With this card, we almost always end up doing excess damage to our opponent's creatures and planeswalkers. And for our last strategy, the big boys are finally coming out. That's right, the giants are here. They're big, they're mean, they're going to deal a lot of damage, and hopefully we're going to ride them to victory. Tectonic Giant gives us a nice choice whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls. It deals 3 damage to each opponent, or we can exile the top 2 cards of our library and then play 1 of them until the end of our next turn. Even in a deck that draws a lot of cards, sometimes that card selection can go a long way to a win. And then Calamity Bearer is just hilarious in this deck. It doubles up all the damage our giants will do, no matter how they end up doing it. And speaking of doing damage in unconventional ways, Basalt Ravager deals X damage upon entering the battlefield, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control with a creature type in common. Strangely worded, but with this deck we're going to either have 2 or 3 wizards or 2 or 3 giants, so this is going to usually do 2 or 3 damage. It might not deal enough damage on the enters the battlefield ability to cause us to draw a card, but just taking a creature out will be enough, because usually on the attack, that 4 power will be enough to get us to draw a card. And then when we're in desperate need to stabilize, Cyclone Summoner can do that by bouncing all non-giant permanents. It's pretty nice that that effect comes on a 7/7 body as well. And then with all these giants and large spells, Thryx the Sun and Storm is the perfect card, being a 5 mana 5/4 flash flying that reduces the casting cost of our expensive spells. So we can play this as our opponent attacks, get a block that they didn't see coming, and then get some cheaper spells on our turn. And then Bergstrider is just an efficient 5 mana 4/4 that if we use snow mana to pay it, which we almost inevitably will, we tap a creature down for a turn. And then our final strategy is going to be double-faced modal cards. These are cards that act as a land when we need them, or cards as a spell when we need them. They're just some of the most flexible pieces Magic has ever printed, and just about any deck can find some that they wouldn't mind having. For X Red, Shatterskull Smashing deals X damage divided as I choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers, but if X is 6 or more, it deals twice X damage to those creatures instead. And then Kazel's Fury requires us to sacrifice a creature, but then deals damage to any target equal to that creature's power. And then Umaro Wizard is just a 5 mana 4/3 that whenever we cast an instant sorcery or wizard spell, it gains flying until end of turn. All of these synergize with Aegar the Freezing Flame, and therefore we have no reason not to run any of them. Kazel's Fury and Umaro Wizard most of the time are played as lands, but that's such a low downside that it's worth running them in the off chance that we're in the situation where hard casting them makes more sense. And then Shatterskull Smashing kind of just depends on the situation of the game, whether we play it as a spell or as a land. It's really 50-50 in this deck. And finally, we're going to talk about the land. Shimmerdrift Vale is a snow land that taps for either red or blue depending on what we choose as it enters the battlefield. Evolving Wilds and Fabled Passage are each fetch lands that can go get either an island or a mountain, with Fabled Passage being able to enter the battlefield on tap if we control 4 or more lands. Then Temple of Epiphany and Volatile Fjord each enter the battlefield tap to add blue or red, and in the case of Temple of Epiphany, enters the battlefield and scries 1. In the case of Volatile Fjord, is a snow land, and is also an island or a mountain in case that comes up, which I don't believe it does at all in this deck. And then we round out our deck with 10 mountains and 8 islands. And we have to make sure they're snow covered because we have no reason not to, and we are running a couple of snow payoffs. So hopefully when we play this deck, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards, making sure the board stays relatively clean, and then letting our big giants come in and smash our opponents to victory. Or, squash our opponents to victory. Please don't unsubscribe. And that does it for this video. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Share with a friend to help the channel grow. Hit that bell icon to make sure you get notifications about new videos to make sure you don't miss anything. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Rob Slota for making the Who Wants to Brawl logo. He's a tattoo artist, and you can check out his Instagram by following the link in the show notes below. You can email me at whowantstobrawl@gmail.com. My Twitter is @brawlwho. I also stream on Magic Arena at twitch.tv/whowantstobrawl. Check me out on Sundays at 11 in the morning, where I stream last week or next week's deck tech. On Mondays, I stream random decks. Sometimes I do Brawl, sometimes I'll even throw in a draft. I also stream a random day of the week, or at least I try to. This is Random Games. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll let you know when I'm going to play ahead of time and what I'm going to play ahead of time. But for now, this is Who letting you know I no longer want to brawl. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.